It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back on Hometown Commander, and we're back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. As always, deck list is going to be down in the description if you don't want to hear me talk, but you're interested in that deck list, or if you want to hear me talk and look at it along the way, you're welcome to. Use it as your heart's content. The goal is here is to start some conversation, have some fun brewing, and at the end of the day, keep ourselves in season, in reverence as far as brewing goes, and having fun. Today we're doing the last of the 4 Commander Masters precons. We finally got around to Mr. Guff, our Planeswalker Commander. Jeskai Planeswalker Party is the name of the precon. Planeswalker Party is the name of the precon. And I have to admit, I think I've warmed up a lot on Guff. Since we originally saw him previewed for the deck to now. Its commander, I think, has a lot of interesting things to it, and so we're just going to try to build the deck around it to take advantage. Mainly, I think it was -3 to start hurting our opponents, but really just to amass a ton of value and make sure that we're getting as much value out of the Planeswalkers and the Planeswalker support that we have. So Commodore Guff is 1 blue, red, white Planeswalker with 5 loyalty. Again, it's always good when you get a Planeswalker that starts with more loyalty than the mana it costs to play it. So at the beginning of your end step, you put a loyalty counter on another target Planeswalker you control. So just 1. I think it would have been really great if Guff did it on everyone. I mean, obviously, I understand why that's not the case. But I think it really probably would have helped my opinion of it just a teeny bit more. Only because then Guff could have buffed himself the turn it came down if you didn't have any of the Planeswalkers. The +1 says we make a 1/1 red wizard creature token with tap, add a red mana. Spend this mana only to cast a Planeswalker spell. That's great. That's a little bit of ramp if you think about it that way. Creature ramp, so that's helpful. Then the -3 says we draw X cards and it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of Planeswalkers you control. This is an ability we want to take advantage of, try to get a bunch of Planeswalkers down, start hurting our opponents. Now, we have 99 cards on our deck, so if we get up to 8 or 9 Planeswalkers, we don't mind doing this. Drawing 9 cards isn't going to be that big of a deal. I did try to bring in some Planeswalkers that care about us drawing cards or have something to do with drawing cards, just so that way when we draw these cards with the -X, we can take some advantage of that. But Jeskai Planeswalkers, again, very interesting 3-color combination for Planeswalkers. I think most people, when they look at 3-color Planeswalkers, they look into Bant, green, white, blue, just for some of the more proliferation aspects that we get into that, or, right, 4 colors with the track. So that's where most people go, or you go full up into 5 colors with Jody the Unifier or Eska. So I like Guff. I like his abilities. Let's see what kind of fun we can have. Start with the landy lands, 37 lands. I changed some of the lands for the precons just slightly. Added in the pathways, added in the check lands, since we're playing a lot of basics, and then I added in our commander lands that come in tapped unless you have 2 or more come in tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. I think these lands are just going to be more helpful. I like the temples. I like some of the other things we were playing. But I feel like we needed just a little bit more firepower. We're keeping Karn's Bastion. I still like Mobilized District. I think it's a great land, especially since we're always going to have a bunch around. Of course, Prairie Stream, we're playing enough basics to make it worth it. But I just want to give ourselves some more inexpensive options to have lands that are going to give us all the colors we need. I love the filter lands. They're one of my favorite 2-color land cycles that people don't play. Thankfully, they continue to be reprinted, so they're getting cheaper and cheaper. And I think that really helps us in a deck like this. Yes, the commander lands need to be printed into the ground so the more people have access to them, but I think they're a good spot to spend some money. The problem at the end of the day is that most commander decks rely on good ramp, good manas from your artifacts, and good lands. And so at the end of the day, pumping a little bit of money into our lands is great. If you want to take this step further, take out 6 basic lands of your choice, go 3 fetches, 3 shock lands, and take a 7th out for that Triumph, or take like the Prairie Stream out for that Triumph, Rockland Triumph if you want to do that. What I want to do is try to make the deck without those. Try to see if I can make the deck mana function without it, and I think we did a pretty good job. Getting into the enchantments, we get to play a lot of really fun enchantments in this deck, including some of my favorite enchantments that have been released in the last year for Planeswalkers decks, and that's the Talent Cycle from the March of the Machine Commander exclusive set. These cards are really cool because you get to enchant a Planeswalker. The Planeswalker gets an extra ability, and then this aura has a triggered ability whenever you do a loyalty ability on that Planeswalker. We get to play 3 of the 5, of course, that were in the cycle, and 2 of these are my favorite 2 in the cycle, so I'm glad we get to play them. The first is Elspeth's Talent, and this is a card that's going to help us a ton in our kind of sub-theme in the deck. It says the granted creature has +1, create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. And then whenever we activate a loyalty ability of that Planeswalker, creatures we control get +1/+1, or +2/+2, and gain vigilance till end of turn. This is exactly what's going to help us protect our Planeswalkers. At the end of the day, we're going to have these giant Planeswalkers sitting on the board that people are going to want to attack down or damage. The best thing we can do is throw a bunch of blockers in the way, make it hard for our opponents to hit those Planeswalkers so we can continue to use their abilities. And if we can weaponize them by making them bigger, attack with them, give them vigilance, a way to both hit our opponent and defend, I think it just helps our strategy overall. Yes, we're playing the Elspeth that has this original ability, but I think by giving a flat +2/+2 to all of our creatures and give them vigilance, it means we can free attack, hopefully keep them alive after our attacks, and then defend with them on the back. We see Rowan's Talent, which says +1 up to 1 target creature gets +2/+0 against first strike and trample. Pardon me. This is great because we have a couple creatures that proliferate or do things when we deal damage to a player, so this is going to be really helpful. And then it says whenever you activate a loyalty ability of Enchanted Planeswalker, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. This can make it more important what we put Rowan's Talent on. Elspeth's Talent, not as much. I think Elspeth's Talent might not be a bad thing on a Planeswalker that doesn't have a lot of great abilities, or a Planeswalker that takes a long time to get to their ultimate, and we can use something from that. Rowan's Talent, I think, is really important on something that has a great ability we want to take advantage of, and you could use multiple times. And then the one we really like the most is Teferi's Talent. The Planeswalker gets -12. You get an emblem with you may activate loyalty abilities of Planeswalker you control on any player's turn anytime you could cast an instant. This takes Teferi Master of Time's ability to allow itself to use its loyalty abilities on every turn, and gives this to all of our Planeswalkers. This is going to almost undoubtedly start bearing our opponents in value and give us everything we need. And this is whenever you draw a card, we put a loyalty counter on the Enchanted Planeswalker. So this, on the right Planeswalker, if we're drawing enough cards with Guff or we're doing other things, is just going to give us what we want. We have a couple of Planeswalkers that have devastating ultimates that are going to potentially end the game for us. So Teferi's Talent's a lot of great there. We're playing all will be one. So every time we put a loyalty counter on a Planeswalker, it's going to deal damage. This is going to be pretty great because it's just going to help us chip down our opponents. We have Guff's ability, we have this, we have other things that we're playing as well. Mystic Remora for just a teeny bit of draw. Obviously we have Guff and we have a few Planeswalkers and cards that help us draw, but any incremental draw isn't going to be bad. And we're playing 2 of the Oath Cycle. The Oath Cycle were enchantments that each were framed around the Planeswalkers that took their oath to join the Gatewatch, and all of them have their own abilities. Everything has an ability when it comes in, and then a static ability that you always get. So Oath of Jace says whenever it comes in, we draw 3 and discard 2, which is pretty great, kind of like a Faithless Looting plus a card. And it says whenever you, during your upkeep, we scry X, where X is the number of Planeswalkers we control. This is great because we can do this before we draw. We can see what's coming. We can kind of plan out our turn, hopefully. And then Oath of Teferi, which is the more important one, says whenever it's the battlefield, we exile another target permanent you control, return to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. This can do one of 2 really cool things. If we have something that has an ETB ability, which we don't have a ton of, we could do that. But the cool part about Oath of Teferi is you can bounce a Planeswalker, exile it, bring it back in, and it will come back in with its starting loyalty. So let's say we have a Planeswalker that's down to 1 loyalty, and the pluses aren't really going to get us back up there, but we want to get it back. Boom, exile it, bring it back. It's going to come back with its starting loyalty, and then we can take advantage of it again that next turn, when we have access to it again. This says you may activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than once. This is a killer effect that's going to help us plan a lot of value out and really get the game jumping. Another card that can do this for us is the Chain Veil. Chain Veil, I'm really excited it got a reprint because this is one of probably the most popular card in any Planeswalker deck. It says, beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a Planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. So just a little bit of downside. If you know anything about the Chain Veil and the lore, the Chain Veil has a lot of downside for the power that it brings. But for 4 mana and tap it, each Planeswalker can activate one of its loyal abilities as though none of it had been activated. So basically every Planeswalker can activate a loyalty ability again, including we could take the same one twice if we wanted to. This card is really, really good because then we can potentially plus our Planeswalkers twice in one turn, gain more loyalty, and get up to those ultimates. Again, most Planeswalkers have an ultimate, a big minus loyalty ability that is going to really affect the game. And we want to get there as quick as we can on all of our Planeswalkers. But it's not just about the loyalty abilities in a deck like this. We chose to bring in Luxure, Jada's Gift. This is a equipment that could be attached to a Planeswalker to turn into a creature where its power and toughness is the amount of loyalty it has. This can be really great to give ourselves some beaters to kind of attack our opponents with. When we get up top to the Planeswalkers, we'll talk about a few Planeswalkers or creatures that can actually turn our Planeswalkers into creatures, which is another way that we can hurt our opponents. And then Ichor Gauntlet, this card came out in Phyrexian Hobby 1. It says Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate, so basically put a loyalty counter on everything or a counter on any permanent we want to, all of them. And then -12, take an extra turn after this one. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, we choose a counter on target permanent, we can add another counter of that kind on that permanent. Most of the time we're going to be putting another loyalty counter on a Planeswalker. What Ichor Gauntlet is going to do more than anything else is let us basically say, hey, this Planeswalker doesn't, maybe it's a War of the Spark Planeswalker that only has a minus ability. We don't really have any good abilities. Well, now it can just proliferate, give everyone else a counter, and we can move on, and with all will be one or with other ways. Now we're just building our Planeswalkers up, getting towards those big abilities in the game. We're playing a lot of mana artifacts because remember we're in Jeskai, we're not in green, we don't really have any good ramp. Arcane Signet, we're playing 2 of the 3 signets. I took off these signets since we're primarily in blue and white to bring in the Decanter of Endless Water. That, as well as Chromatic Lantern, will get us any color. Each of them give us different things. The Decanter gives us a maximum hand size. The Chromatic Lantern lets all of our lands tap for any color. Gatewatch Beacon comes in with 3 loyalty counters on it. And whenever a Planeswalker comes in, if this still has a loyalty counter in it, we can move a loyalty counter from it onto that Planeswalker. And that's pretty cool because we can get an extra one the turn that Planeswalker comes down. Playing Soul Ring and then all 3 of our talismans. Again, just trying to get a good cross section of mana artifacts that are going to give us good value. We're not playing a ton of spells because we really don't need them. Really, we're just playing removal and a little bit of searching or a little bit of protection. So for the instance, we're playing a counterspell, classic counterspell. I believe this came in the deck as well. We just want to give ourselves a little bit of counterplay. Rapid Hybrid, Reality Shift, and Swords to Plowshares is our removal. Just a little bit of removal that can hit mostly creatures. We could definitely bring in a Chaos Warp if you want to, if you want a little bit more targeted removal or an extra counterspell or 2. But I think we really want to just try to get our strategy going and accumulating value as we go. Repeated Reverberation can either let us copy a spell that we're casting or copy a loyalty ability. This one's pretty cool. And we have to do it before we play that thing, but it could be really good depending on what we choose to use, whether it's getting an extra removal spell or getting an extra big loyalty ability that goes off. We don't have to pay for the loyalty ability. We wouldn't have to pay the cost twice. We would just get the effect twice. And then Semester's End. Semester's End is kind of cool. What we can do is exile any number of target creatures or Planeswalkers we control. At the beginning of the next end step, they all come back. All creatures come back with a +1/+1 counter, and all Planeswalkers come back with an additional loyalty counter. Yes, this will kind of reset the number of loyalty counters that are on our planeswalkers, but the important part is it'll protect our planeswalkers from getting destroyed, exiled, what have you. So Semester's End is very important. We could have also used something like Clever Concealment, which would do a very similar thing, just phasing them out, still protecting them. That requires us get a lot heavier into needing creatures on the battlefield, which I think we will. Again, I just think this is a spot where you can take your deck and determine what are the things that you want to put in for that protection. Teferi's Protection would, of course, work as well. There's plenty of these cards that can do that, and I think this is where you get your dealer's choice on what you want in your deck. Blasphemous Act, Promise of Loyalty, and Urza's Ruinous Blast are our removal. Blasphemous Act is most always going to work out for us the best, because as much as we want our token creatures to protect our planeswalkers, it's not as important keeping our planeswalkers out there, and this is going to hopefully take everything out. Promise of Loyalty is a really fun new board way. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacks the rest, and then each of those creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. Put it on an important card, put it on someone's commander, Voltron commander, creature that's a flyer that we can't block that could potentially take us out. Those type of things. Then they can attack us as long as that's counters on there, and we can just keep proliferating vow counters on there so they can't take it off somehow if we wanted to. There's plenty of ways we can interact with that. And the Ruinous Blast just exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary, probably going to take care of most of the threats against us, other than people's commanders. But hey, not much is going to be left over. And remember, every single planeswalker, whether it has it written on it or not, is legendary. Some of the old planeswalkers don't say legendary on them. All of the new ones do, and all the ones that have been reprinted in this deck do. But remember, every single planeswalker is legendary. So all of our planeswalkers will be completely safe. And then deploy the Gatewatch. We look at the top 7, put 2 planeswalkers onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom. This is pretty useful for 6 mana. The deck we have below, sit in front of us is running at about 20% planeswalkers, so we should have the chance to hit at least one. But of course, remember, we do have ways to draw. We're going to have ways to scry. I think we're going to have ways to hopefully not play this completely blind, but have a good time before we choose to use it. Or worst case scenario, we just hit something with it. Get one of the creatures, and we don't have a ton. But I want to talk about 2 creatures here as potential secondary commanders that we have that are going to help us along our path for this deck. The first is Kaikar. Kaikar Wind's Fury. Of course, this got a great reprint in the main set, and this is a really cool card. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we get a 1/1 spirit. We can sack those spirits for red mana. This is going to help us. Not only it can block, but it's going to create 1/1s that can block for us. And then, worst case scenario, we can use those 1/1s for mana. And the second card is Pramikon Sky Rampart. This is a really fun card, released all the way back in C19, I believe. It says, when it enters the battlefield, we choose left or right. Each player may only attack the nearest opponent in the chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. Pramikon is really cool, and we have a planeswalker in our deck that does something very similar, because we can choose between the players beside us which we think we are going to have a better time defending, and pick that direction, right? They attack into us. Sure, that will limit where we can attack, but I don't think we mind that, because slowing down the amount of people attacking us is going to ramp up the amount we can do with our planeswalkers, and I think that definitely comes out in the wash. Flux Channeler, I believe, got a reprint in the deck. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we proliferate. Again, proliferating is the name of the game in a Planeswalker deck. It's going to help us out, get over those ultimates even quicker. Giant Phoenix is a fun new card. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, we copy the next loyalty ability we activate this turn, and we can choose new targets for the copy. And then whenever we cast a planeswalker, if Jaya's in the graveyard, we can bring it back to the battlefield. Or Phoenix is in the graveyard, we can bring it back to the battlefield, which is killer. Most Phoenixes have this ability to kind of come back from the graveyard, and it's cool to see it on flavor and do so much good for us. And it has haste, so the turn it comes back, it's going to come in and hit in for some damage. Lae'zel says whenever we put one or more counters on a creature or planeswalker or yourself, we can put that many plus one of those counters on it instead. This works really well with proliferate, because this will basically say proliferate, we'll go to put 1, nope, we're going to put 2. And so this is going to get even better for what we're trying to do with our planeswalkers. So the turn we activate them, we get an extra one, Lae'zel, and then if we proliferate, we get that and the extra one. So Lae'zel can lead to a lot of extra loyalty counters going on. Leori, Spark Touch Hunter, is the secondary commander of the deck, and I still think it fits really well. Flying and Vigilance 3/3, so a nice blocker. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we choose a Planeswalker type until end of turn. Whenever we activate an ability of a Planeswalker of that type, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So when we choose a Planeswalker type, every Planeswalker in the game has a subtype of their first or their proper name. So the best example I can give you without getting into specifics is every Teferi Planeswalker has Teferi as a type. This works well for Leori because if we have multiple Teferis on the battlefield, for example, we attack with Leori, hopefully get in for damage. If we do, we say Teferi, and now we get to copy every Teferi ability that we choose. Now that, of course, can change for other ones. Now we don't have to just pick a type of one that we have multiples of. We could pick any type we want and make sure that we always have a Planeswalker of that type to use an ability for. But you can see that if you have multiple Planeswalkers of that type, you get to add some benefit. Monastery Mentor can make us some tokens every time we cast a spell, a non-creature spell, and then all of them have prowess. So the more non-creature spells we cast in a turn, the better it gets. I like Monastery Mentor. It's going to just give us a few tokens, stick around, and then depending on how big of a turn we have, depends on how big our board's going to look at the end. Onaki Oathkeeper, one of the new cards, says creatures can attack you or Planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each one they control that's attacking a Planeswalker you control. This is worded interestingly, but basically what it means is they have to pay 1 for each creature they want to attack a Planeswalker that we control with. No, this won't stop everyone from attacking us, but hopefully it'll slow them down a little bit, prevent them from getting in as want to, right? In the early turns, most people are going to use all of their mana and then try to swing. This hopefully will stop those opponents from doing that. And then for 6 mana, we can exile it from our graveyard and bring a Planeswalker back. And that's a pretty great ability because when someone takes care of one of our Planeswalkers we really want, we definitely want to get it back. Spark Double will basically act as a second copy of either our commander or any Planeswalker in our deck. The cool part of though is that Spark Double will copy it and become non-legendary, so we get to have a second copy of it. Spark Double could be a lot of really great things in our deck. We have so many cool Planeswalkers, but it also could just be another copy of our commander. And having 2 of those -3s on Guffs is probably going to help nuke our opponents down pretty darn quickly. Spark Shaper Visionary, 3 mana for an 0/5. This is the beginning of combat under your turn. Choose any number of target Planeswalkers you control. They become 3/3 bird creatures with flying, hexproof, and whenever this creature does combat against a player, we scry 1. Well, here we go. We can look at the top cards of our deck, take advantage of our other cards. I like this. Again, anything that can turn our Planeswalkers into creatures and help turn them into damage is great. Now, the only downside, right, if a Planeswalker comes in this turn and it gets turned into a bird, it still won't be able to attack due to summoning sickness rules. But I think that more often than not, this is just going to help us out. We have another Planeswalker we're playing that does something very similar, and that will help us out as well. And then the Peregrine Dynamo, this guy released in Dominaria Knight Commander. It has haste. It's a 1/5, so not a bad blocker on the ground if we need it. But for 1 tap, we can copy target activated or triggered ability you control as from a legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose no targets for the copy. So we cannot copy Guff's abilities, which is a downside. But I think we have so many other Planeswalkers and so many other great things that we don't mind this. Activated or triggered, so every single loyalty ability of our Planeswalkers will be copyable with this. And triggered usually includes the word when or whenever. So most of our creatures that we're playing have a triggered ability or an activated ability. So that's pretty darn cool. So hopefully we can take good advantage of the Peregrine Dynamo, mainly in copying our Planeswalker abilities, but also in just blocking for us in the meantime if need be. 3 mana isn't bad for a 1/5 that's going to gum up the ground, and then if we need to copy, we can copy. Well, let's get into our Planeswalkers. We're rocking 21, which I think is could be low for some people. But again, I've found with messing around with Planeswalkers decks in the past, it's not just about having a crap ton of Planeswalkers. You need to have a good support system for your Planeswalkers. The only deck that I've really ever played that I can compare this to is my Kethis Aristocrats Super Friends deck that I made. And the big thing I learned was it wasn't just about having 30 Planeswalkers that can make tokens. It was about also having support cards that can keep us going when we have those Planeswalkers. So I think I tried to pick 21 Planeswalkers that are all going to be value engines on their own. but can also affect this greater plan, that we have going on. First up, we have a Johnny Steadfast, 4 mana for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. The +1 gives a creature first strike, vigilance, and lifelink until end of turn, which is pretty cool depending on what it's going to. +2, or the -2 puts a counter, +1 counter and a loyalty counter on each creature and planeswalker we control respectively. That's a pretty important ability, and that can help in some ways, right, increase the loyalty across the board. And then -7 says if a source would deal damage to you or a planeswalker you control, prevent all but one of that damage. This is going to help, of course, with things attacking into our planeswalkers or attacking us and hopefully keeping us alive. Archangel Elspeth for 4 mana, for 4 loyalty. The +1 can make us a soldier with lifelink, so gain us a little bit of life back. The -2 puts 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, and it becomes an angel with flying. That's pretty cool, because then we can, if need be, block those flyers that could be attacking. And then -6 is return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. A lot of our creatures, some of our creatures are 3 mana, some of our planeswalkers are 3 mana or less. So this is cool because we can potentially get a bunch of different things back from the graveyard if need be. Chandra, Awakened Inferno, I believe, got a reprint in the deck. 6 mana planeswalker for 6 mana. It cannot be countered, which is great. Always great to protect the planeswalkers on the stack if need be. The +2 says each opponent gets an emblem with the beginning of your upkeep. This emblem deals 1 damage to you, so on every one of their turns they're taking a damage. -3 dealing 3 damage to each non-elemental creature. If we need to wipe the board, this could potentially help us get some tokens out of the way. And then the -X deals X damage to our creature planeswalker. If that permanent that died that way would die, of course, go to the graveyard. It gets exiled instead. Wicked Inferno is a fun card because you use the +2, you stack these emblems, and your opponent's emblems are notably very difficult to get rid of, and we can start hitting our opponents every turn for some damage, and hopefully mix that with Guff's ability to kind of minus them down and hurt them. Chandra, Legacy of Fire, 5 mana for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. This is at the beginning of your end step. It deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalker you control. Here's another copy of Guff's ability, and this is one that we definitely want for sure. +1 gives us a red mana for each planeswalker you control. That's fantastic. That's going to help us out a ton. And then the 0 says we can remove a loyalty counter from any number of planeswalkers you control. Exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play them this turn. So this is kind of this red impulse draw. Exile some from the top, play them. But I really like that static ability. Just hurting our opponent's turn, and that +1 is just going to give us some extra mana to play some planeswalkers. The cool part about that red mana is it's going to really end up feeding into either the red cost for our planeswalkers or those generic costs for our planeswalkers, so we can use our lands more effectively and get as many planeswalkers or things down as we can. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, +1 lets us exile the top card. We can cast it this turn. If we don't, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. +1 just adds 2 red. -3 deals 4 damage to a creature. And this -7 says whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. So that can help hurt our opponents down the long run. Elspeth, Sun's Champion. We can make 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. This is in reference to that talent card that we looked at earlier. The -3 destroys all creatures power 4 or greater. This could be really important to take out our opponent's big creatures, or potentially wipe the board depending on what the state of the board is in. And then the -7 says creatures we control get +2/+2 and have flying. This could be a way to help us end the game, getting all our creatures in the air and attacking into our opponents. Gideon, ally of Zendikar. It becomes a 5/5 with Indestructible that's still a planeswalker, and we prevent all damage that would be dealt to it that turn. So if you can attack more or less for free, the 0 puts a 2/2 down, and then -4 gives all of our creatures, it gives us an emblem to buff all of our creatures. I like the Gideon planeswalkers because they turn themselves into creatures, and I really wanted to fit in Gideon Blackblade Reforged as well, because it's another one that can turn itself into a creature, but it also can exile some permanents. I just had a really tough time getting the amount of planeswalkers I wanted to play down, so it would definitely be a planeswalker I would look at bringing back in. Mordekainen is pretty cool. 6 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker from AFR. +2 says we draw 2 and then put a card from our hand on the bottom of our library. That's great because instead of discarding it, we get to just dump a land or a card we don't need. -2 makes us a dog illusion token with this creature's power and toughness is equal to twice the number of cards in our hand. And then the -10 says we exchange our hand in our library, then shuffle. You get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. I like this card in this deck for 2 reasons. The -2 is going to make us some pretty big dog illusion tokens, and if we can get him in the air, that's going to be great. Right, it's going to deal a bunch of damage. And the -10 could save us if we draw way too much of our deck. It can exchange our hand in our library, hopefully get us back safe, and then keep us from decking out and losing the game. Narset Transcendent, +1, so we can look at the top card. If it's a non-creature, non-land, we can reveal it and put it into our hand. -2, whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery from your hand, this turn it gains Rebound. That means at this, I believe at the start of the next upkeep, we can cast it again for free. And then the -9 says your opponents, you get an emblem with your opponents can't cast non-creature spells. That's probably going to shut off a lot of the game at that point and push us forward to winning. We don't want to do that too early. I would very much recommend, if you're playing this deck for the first time or you're playing these effects that stop your opponents from doing things, don't do this too early, because what we don't want to do is to use this ability as soon as we can, and then it take us 10 turns to finally end the game. It's not fun for you, it's not fun for your opponents. So I would say wait on Narset until you know you have a good solid plan of attack to end it, use it, and get yourself out of that game. Narset of the Ancient Way, really cool Planeswalker from Ikoria. The +1 gains you 2 life, and then you get a mana. You can only use it to cast a non-creature spell. Most time we're going to use it right into another Planeswalker. The -2 lets us draw, and then we can discard a card. If we do, it deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker. That's cool, because we could potentially deal some damage to something or snipe something. If you want to plan to use the -2, sometimes it's better to go into combat first, see what blocks, and then see if you can -2, a creature out of the way. And then the -6, get an emblem whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. Again, just can help knock out our opponents. We also are playing the Narset for More of the Spark, stopping our opponents from drawing more than 1 card each turn. And the -2 lets us look at the top 4, put a non-creature, non-land card from it into our hand, and put the rest on the bottom. Narset is a great, perfect example of a card that would be great for one of those talents, because it only has a negative Planeswalker ability, so any way to give it something extra to do would be really great. Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, giving us a 1/1 servo every time we cast a non-creature spell, so that's great, going to help protect us, and the -2 can do some shenanigans if need be. Sarkhan the Masterless is another perfect example of a Planeswalker we really want to see. It says whenever a player attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. We don't have a ton of dragons, so we're not going to use that too much. But the one thing we really like is, until end of turn, each Planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon with flying, and gain 4/4 red dragon and gains flying. This could potentially help us end a game, depending on how many Planeswalkers we have. Get in or attack our opponents and just proceed to beat our opponents down. I don't think every game we want to sit back and wait for people to come to us. We want to amass our Planeswalker value, and I think we also want to try to end the game as well. Not just rely on Guff's ability or Chandra's abilities to deal damage to our opponents. We want to try to attack if we can, and if it takes something like Sarkhan to just make our whole board into 4/4 dragons, I think that's going to help a ton. And then the -3 can just get us a 4/4 dragon. So if we want to just start amassing dragon tokens, we can do that as well. Again, they're great blockers and they have flying, so that's even better. We get into our section of Teferis. First up is 5-mana hero of Dominaria. +1 to draw a card, and then at the end of the start of the end step, we untap 2 lands. -3 to put something into its owner's library, third from the top. This is really great for a commander, but it can be good for a lot of other things. And then -8 says whenever we draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. This could be really good. We can get that set up and then go off with Guff, draw a bunch of cards, exile a bunch of things. You can see Teferi does a lot of great things. Draws us cards and hopefully can deal with the board. Teferi, Master of Time, is probably one of my favorite commanders. Planeswalkers have been printed. Just because of its ability, we can use its ability on anyone's turn. Anytime we could cast an instance, we get to use Teferi, Master of Time once per turn. +1, draw 1, and then discard 1. -3 phases out a creature we don't control. This could help protect something big from attacking us. And then -10 to take 2 extra turns. I love Teferi, Master of Time, and it's a Planeswalker I'm very happy to play in this one. Teferi, Temporal Archmage. +1 to look at the top 2. 1 to our hand, but 1 at the bottom. -1 to untap up to 4 target permanents. Most of the time we're picking lands on that one. And then the -10, which is where the reference of Teferi's talent comes from, we get an emblem with you may activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control on any player's turn anytime you could cast an instant. So again, very important planeswalker that again eventually can let us, plus on everyone's turn do a bunch of really cool things. Teferi's Toporo Pilgrim, one of the newer Teferis out of this, probably I think the newest of all the 5 of these, and again, one that I really enjoy. 5 mana for 4 loyalty. Whenever we draw a card, we put a counter on it, so every turn we're automatically going to put one on it. The 0 just draws a card, well, that will automatically put one on it. For -2, we get to make a 2/2 Spirit creature token that lets us get a counter on it every time we draw a card. Well, that's great, because now we're going to get these 2/2 Spirits that are just going to get grown. And the -12 says target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to their owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So what you do is your opponent picks one permanent, shuffles every non-permanent non-land permanent they control back into their library, and is going to be in a pretty tough shape. I like it. It's a good ultimate, and it's going to help us try to stop people if need be. Teferi Time Raveler is another really fun one. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. This will prevent anyone from casting a spell on your turn, and it will prevent anyone from casting a spell except during their main phase when the stack is empty. And that's a painful time restriction for most people. So many things in this game get done in response, stop combos, counter spells, do things like that. The only downside, of course, is it doesn't stop abilities, so your opponents can still use their abilities, but Teferi Time Raveler will stop a lot of things from happening. The +1 lets us cast sorceries as though they had flash. And the -3 returns a target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw 3 cards. Draw a card. This is great because we can bounce our own things, bounce our opponent's things. Again, Teferi Time Raveler gives us so much value, and it's definitely worth the cost to put into this deck. Teo, Geometric Tactician. This is one of the new ones from the deck. 3 mana for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. Again, great value. When it enters the battlefield, we make a wall creature token with Defender and Flying. And having Flying is actually pretty important in my opinion. This is a callback to Teo's card in War of the Spark that got to make those Defender wall tokens. +1, you and target opponent each draw a card. Okay, well, there's a little bit of card there for us, but I think the -2 is really important, and this is very similar to what Pramicon does. It says choose left or right until your next turn. Each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the last chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. Again, just like Pramicon, pick a direction, they can only attack in that direction. This is cool because it gives us another one of these things that potentially protect us. The Eternal Wanderer is a really fun card. This packs a lot of really cool things. It can only be attacked by 1 creature each combat. Just note with this ability, if your opponent puts anything down in tapped and attacking after attackers are declared, they can attack the Eternal Wanderer. Her ability just means that only 1 declared attacker can be declared at Eternal Wanderer. The +1 exiles a target artifact or creature and brings it back in at our end step, at their end step. This can stop something from affecting us, bounce one of our own, blink one of our own creatures. Some fun things we can do with it. The 0 makes us a 2/2 Samurai with double strike. It's both a great attacker and a great defender because of that double strike. And then the -4 says for each player, choose a creature that player controls, and then they sacrifice all of the creatures not chosen this way. This gets around Indestructible. This doesn't get around Shroud, but the cool part is we get to pick the creature. So this is going to hurt our opponents, wipe the board, and it kind of acts as another board wipe that we have access to that can hurt us in the sense that we have to get rid of our creatures too, but again, we just pick the one we most want to keep and nuke the rest. And then Vronos, Masked Inquisitor. This is one of the new planeswalkers. 5 loyalty, 5 mana. Again, great cost. Up to 2 target planeswalkers you control phase out into the beginning of the next end step. So the cool part there is you get to protect 2 of your planeswalkers you think your opponents are going to attack, and they come back in on your turn. -2 for each opponent, return up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls to its owner's hand. This is a killer ability because it lets us target the things we want and bounce them back. And then -7 target artifact you control becomes a 9/9 construct that gains vigilance, indestructible, and this creature can't be blocked. This is going to potentially hurt our opponents, and so I like it. This is another example of a great ultimate that hopefully we can use to our advantage. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of Guff? I think Guff is, it's a commander I think I wrote off really quickly, but I think now that I've built it, this is a deck that could be a ton of fun. I think my heart is still set on my Kethis Aristocrats Planeswalker deck just because it got really out of hand and did exactly what an aristocrats deck wants to do. But I see a lot of fun in this deck. You get the Sarkhan, you get the damage to your opponents, you get to play all the Teferis that do so many cool things. And I think a lot of the new cards really get to shine in a deck like this. But hey, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion with you about this deck. Let me know what you think. Let's chat, and I will catch you guys next time.